With the Advantex subfloor assembly, you can be sure that you're building a reputation on something stronger. And the best builders, well, they may always stand apart, but they never stand alone. So ask yourself, are you bringing your A game?
Welcome back to the UnBuild podcast. I'm Jake Bruton. I'm joined today for yet another Q&A episode. That's question and answer. Not quince and apples, as I believe you said a few episodes ago.
Did I?
Yes. Yes, that was your joke. Well, maybe somebody prompted you to say it.
I won't take credit for that joke. It's the fruit of my labor.
And we're on. I'm joined today by Peter Yost.
Apples.
And Steve Basic.
Yo.
And we're going to jump right into it. We have a mix of questions that came from one of Steve Basic's requests for question posts, and then our email post. I think, actually, I don't know who the first one came from, but it was from your IG.
Okay.
Can you tell me about any effective passive cooling strategies for hot climates?
Effective passive cooling strategy.
And so my first thought was, overhangs and shade.
Put a big roof on the house. Build a building over your house.
I desperately want to do that, by the way.
I do too.
I want to build it.
I tried to do it in a Texas house. I had I don't know, it was probably a 40-foot by 80-foot roof, and then the house kind of coastlined inside. Underneath it. So sometimes it was an 8-foot overhang or a 12-foot overhang. Sometimes it was 4 foot. But it basically had a colonnade all around the house where the minimum overhang was.
And
like
you didn't
4
get
or
away
5
with
feet.
it?
I didn't. They chose a different approach to designing the house. But
I want that, except for I want like all the sleeping in one space, and then it's completely detached from like the living room, kitchen, so that you have to go from one to the other, but it's covered, so it doesn't matter. It's just brisk sometimes.
I have 2 pet peeves in this topic, just because.
Is it us?
No. Well, you are pet peeves, but that's that would be a separate topic, I think.
Okay.
The idea that you can shade appropriately for the entire year with one setting or one device. Yeah, I think that's, in high performance buildings, I think that's
It does say hot climates.
Yeah,
so
but
if we're really trying for the majority of the year to have that shade, I mean, if we're building in Miami, we're not trying to let much sun in very often, right?
But my second peeve in this area is that people think that the glass or the glazing can handle solar heat gain. And we're encouraged that because the NFRC label on the window says, hey, make sure you know what the solar heat gain coefficient is. Well, by the time that direct sunlight gets to the window, that's like the worst place to try to manage, in my opinion.
Yep.
Because
and
when
curtains on the inside aren't going to do it either.
Yeah, because you've sort of already lost the battle. But I admit it's challenging to get proper solar control with overhangs, particularly just one overhang. And of course, a little plug for the efficientwindowcoverings.org website, because
you know what I just thought of?
Peter's favorite website.
He didn't even
it's
let
his
me finish
homepage.
the introduction of the website.
I was just going to come up with this revelation, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, well,
He didn't know you were talking because he was thinking.
Yeah, I was operating on a different dimension. Sorry.
A different plane.
Anyway, there is a good website that talks about efficient window coverings that covers this issue, but you clearly had something you were bursting to get out.
I did. So we've all been on airplanes, right? And on the back of the airplane, the wing will extend and curve down. Imagine if we were able to build a roof that would go out and curve down and become more of a shading device. And then we could control
Active overhangs.
I think I'm onto something.
Well, and I
Or
know
could we
the
just
first
do-
thing's going to be your structural engineer who says,
Well, I just have
the
to-
reason the wing does that is because it's trying to take off and your building wants
slow
to stay
down when
down.
we're
So how
on
about
the
instead
landing.
of reinventing the wheel on this one, why don't we just put external shading devices on the windows like they do in lots of other parts of the world?
In Europe, it's pretty much like it's their insect screen.
Because the
I
window's
tell
open
people.
in, right? That's the
Yeah,
big
but it's
difference.
their insects. They buy the window, the insect screen, and the shading device.
Those of you that
It just comes with it.
live on the East Coast, we could refer to those as shutters, too.
Shut us.
Real operating shutters.
Listen, if you're on the East Coast, it's shut us.
Shutters?
Shut us.
Okay.
They're not shutters. They're shut us.
I thought that was something that you got when you got old.
No. You don't like my airplane wing? All I have to do is get a couple airplanes, recycle the wings, and just put that mechanism.
that'll be easy.
Just curve right down in front
Our
of the
two-man
window.
framing crew can
So-
put those up.
On Farley's ADU, you used the racking slotted overhang
Yes, we
shades?
did like a louver that was removable.
Almost like a
Right,
trellis.
but didn't you have like two versions for different seasons or
No,
something?
we just had one.
Just
It was
had
just
one.
had one, but it was removable.
So how has that worked out for them?
It's worked out very good.
Because a builder lives there, and he's
Because a builder
okay
lives
with
there and
taking
he
those things
takes-
off seasonally.
This makes me think of, I went to a presentation of this godfather of passive solar up at the B4 conference, and I was so looking forward to his presentation. And I sat down and he saw me, before he started and waved. And then he said, well, this is Passive Solar 101. I thought, oh, now he knows I'm here. I don't want Passive Solar 101. This is like the godfather of passive solar design. So I couldn't leave, but then he started to get all these questions about, stack effect ventilation systems. And he was getting a little frustrated with the questions. And he turned to the audience and said, look, passive designed homes require active occupants.
And probably active solutions.
That was not the end of the sentence, Steve.
Oh,
And now because I'm
paused.
old,
but you
I
paused.
paused, but
Trying to be supportive.
The tension is
Shoot.
palpable.
I know.
so active
Be
homes
supportive.
tolerate passive occupants. And it's true. I don't think that we can do really, really high performance buildings without some responsibility for the optimization of the performance of the building, not to rely upon this activities of the behavior of the occupants. It's hard not to do some things that are related to improving building performance, like changing the overhangs or, lowering and raising shades. Things.
I want to say the
If we think of
exterior-
those as maintenance items.
The European
That's a better way to
shading
put it.
devices have weather related and timing related.
They should.
Yeah.
The windshield wipers on new cars come on when it starts raining. Why can't we?
But in my experience, most operable external shading devices are already quite expensive, and the ones that
Yeah.
operate with sensors are
Are we about to have a return on investment conversation? What are you doing?
tricked up by my own logic. Oh, that is painful.
Okay.
But it is, I'm going to go back and beat up all the architects out there that draw their shading diagram, right? Because they draw June 21st and December 21st. And then they have
Well, that's the longest and shortest day of this year.
Well, then they
Steve.
have that pretty angled line that says, see, the window's shaded. And it's like, yeah, you'd shaded June 21st. That's not the hottest day of the year. Hottest day of the year is probably about 2 months later, right? August 15th-ish.
That lag.
Yeah. And the same with using December 21st. Coldest day of the year is probably February, mid-February somewhere, early February is the coldest day of the year. So that's when we really need maximum amount of heating. If you use the December 21st, you're already starting to shade some of that room.
Are there tables for architects that make
Oh
into
yeah,
account the-
Architectural Graphic Standards has all of the altitudes based on longitude, and so you can find
I
out
know,
exactly.
but do they compensate for the temperature lag?
No,
That's what I'm saying.
No, but they're physical. They're dimensions that physically place the sun in the sky. So you can
Yeah.
go to the table and say June 21st at 38 degrees, the sun is
Yeah, it's
73
Memphis,
degrees above the horizon, which is June 21st for Boston.
You said it really quick. What is this that you're talking? What is the document?
Architectural Graphic Standards.
Okay. Wanted to make sure people got it.
Okay, good.
Okay. So, question number 2 came via email from Joe. Is it overkill to apply a peel and stick underlayment on the top of zip sheathing for a roof?
It depends.
Yeah. That's the total answer, right?
Yeah.
Depends
Okay,
on
let's move
what
on.
peel
What's the
and
next
stick.
question?
Depends on what's happening underneath the sheathing. Depends on where you live.
What the roofing material is, and
As with any other building science question, it needs to be appropriate to the conditions and construction methods.
I guess the
right?
concern I have, if you don't have faith in the weatherproofing system of what you've already put down and you feel that you need to back it up, that's a little like, do I not trust or do I consciously say, look, I need a belt and suspenders approach?
You know what's
here.
interesting?
I go that way because
With-
we do use zip on the roof.
With zip on the roof, I've had roofers put roofing paper over it, and it's like, you don't need the paper. They go, we know, but the zip is kind of slippery if it gets wet in the morning.
Yeah.
And
Or our
the
roofer
paper's a
will
little
say,
better.
well, I'm the one that has to carry the warranty. At which point I'm like, yeah, that's fine.
But at least if you're putting down building paper over a product like roof zip sheathing, the impact on the drying potential upward is pretty low, right?
Yeah.
Because the vapor permeability of the asphalt impregnated paper is quite high.
But that's not a peel and stick. So if we're using like Grace Vicor
Yeah,
on the top
well-
side of the roof, that's a completely different thing, right?
That it is, and I think that if you talk to the zip people, they'll say, well, we are counting on drying potential upward and outward on their sheathings for walls and roofs. So putting down an impermeable membrane over top of that, that's belt and suspenders for bulk water, but it's not giving you the proper drying potential.
I'm gonna close this one out with what I always say. The minute I put tape, caulking, or some kind of membrane on something, you should consider what are you sealing in, not sealing out. Because the sealing out, that's easy. Oh, I want to stop the rain and I want to do better. But that kind of overshadows any problems that you might be committing.
But the code does require like 2 runs of fully adhered membrane. Now,
The code, I want to say the exact code is 36 inches parallel to the plane of the exterior wall.
Well, we need to do a topic on building codes and stuff that's appropriate that they promote, because that's all
That's
about
right after the one where
it's
we
all
read
about
the
ice
phone
stamps, right?
That's right after we read the phone book episode.
Right, because
I call for L through M.
The band of 3 or 4 feet around the eaves, that's a reaction to ice dams. Putting down a membrane doesn't solve the root cause behind the ice dam. So it's another,
and not everywhere has ice dams.
and it's symptomatic rather than going after the cause.
Yeah.
There we go.
Peter
got
hates the
fired
codes.
up.
Jake hates the military. Got it.
Easy. From John, this is 3 questions in one. Number 1, why do you prefer basement insulation on the interior side of a foundation?
Because I can see it. It's nice and warm.
Go back to Foundations 101 and you can get an in-depth explanation. But if it's on the inside, I can protect it. It's easier to install. I have more options.
And it's less insulation. Because if you chase around, I mean, it's minimal, but if you chase around the inside linear footage of a foundation
10
wall
inches in
versus-
each direction less.
Yeah, every time you turn the corner, it's 10 inches. So it does add to it. And honestly, most of it, I like it on the inside because it can be one of the last things you can do, which means that it gets pretty well protected and not beat up as much. But the builders that I work with had voiced an opinion that they like it because it's rainy day work, right? On a day where, hey, my guys, I would be sending them home, we can go in and say, yeah, we'll bang out that basement insulation or the garage
and that's a
insulation.
framer installed insulation most of the time because they're going to put up prop walls in front of that.
Or something, yeah.
And so they got to stick it in there real quick before they continue going.
And the whole thermal mass and stuff, I don't buy the need to expose the foundation and all that.
I think another issue is that I have recommended exterior insulation on some foundation systems, but if I do, the big issue is how do I protect it from bugs and squirrels and any other type of critter?
One of the things, and you might have an answer to this, but I remember going and seeing a house. It was up in Vermont, a Habitat house. They had 3 layers of 2-inch XPS on the outside of it. All right.
Okay. On the foundation.
On the foundation. And it had an extremely high water table. So it was sitting in water, and I'm thinking, doesn't the water kind of negate the insulating
Reduces
factor
just
or
about all of
reduce it significantly by allowing the heat to transfer through the water?
Well, if it's XPS, it's primarily closed cell foam, which means that the thing that creates the insulation value are the little gas bubbles all the way through. And if they're not filled with water, they're still filled with gas. The water's not getting into the insulation. However, XPS does take on moisture, but very, very slowly compared to EPS, the expanded polystyrene, which takes on moisture, liquid water pretty quickly. But once you get XPS wet, it takes a really long time to dry. So, I do not feel that we should be using plastic foam insulation on the outside of buildings because it's just really too hard to protect from not only bulk water, but also from things that like to chew it.
And you know, the other thing that it's I say it jokingly, but it's a hard solution is how do you finish it at grade, right?
Yeah.
And every drawing I've ever seen, it says protective covering or something. They never tell me what it is.
The call out is easy.
Yeah, protective covering. Okay, and
Price
I get it.
by others.
You know, we could
too.
probably use a 1x12 of boral or Azek or something that you can bury in the ground. But it's funny that bullet gets dodged regularly.
Okay, second part of this question. If closed cell spray foam isn't an option, how do you insulate a rim joist?
So, this is a good one. Years ago, I had drawn a detail where XPS, we would cut it.
Rough cut, right?
Rough cut it or bevel the edges, but it wanted to be just a little smaller.
So that
then you could seal it in there with some expanding foam. And it's funny because when I did my addition, my wife Holly went around and she did all the rim joist insulation. She was asking, hey, what can I do? And I was like, hey, here's a perfect job for you. Because you can just kind of hold it up, eyeball cut it, put it in, and then expanding foam seal it around.
So after R value, the most important part is something's going to stay in place, right?
Stay in place and air seal.
Yeah.
Right? That effectively gave you all of those in a cheap way. And the cut of the...
But technically, you're still using foam.
Technically, we're still using foam, but the foam that we used down there was cutoffs from all the insulating foam that we used outside on the wall and stuff. So
if you're not looking for air control layer there, if your air control layer is on the outside, mineral wool stuff really well in a spot where they're not going to...
We've had builders net it and blow it with rock wool or cellulose.
But what we're getting at is there's lots of options.
There is.
But you need the R value. You need to know whether or not it's working towards air control, and then it needs to be installed in a way where it's going to stay, because there's not likely to be wallboard smashed to the inside of it.
There's lots of options, but it's hard to argue that nothing is easier than spraying closed cell foam from the floor sheathing down the rim joist, over the mud sill, over the top of the foundation wall to whatever insulation.
And certainly aero barrier is an option for dealing with that rim joist area. I will say if you
air
put
leakage, not the insulation part.
Correct, the air leakage. And I will say that, there's a question of if you just put some sort of batt material or rigid mineral, does that require a vapor retarder to the warm side in winter and colder climates? Probably does. Yeah. Although certainly not
the
anything
warm
I'm
side
worried
of
about.
a quote wall, even though it's open to the floor cavity.
Right.
Yep.
It's not something
Man,
that
I'm
I
so
would
glad
worry
I don't
about, but
cold
the
climate.
codes might have an opinion on that.
So happy I don't build in a cold climate.
I
Okay.
don't think you'd hack it.
John's I don't think
You're
I could
kind of
either.
a princess.
I am, yeah. I wasn't expecting to be called a princess this day.
You never know.
Part 3. Why not bring your poly subslab vapor retarder up the walls on the inside face of the foundation and then lay it on top of the wall, thereby creating a vapor barrier for the concrete?
So first of all, if you're relying upon the construction moisture in the concrete to dry to the interior, you'd have to wait to do that layer, right? Because you're preventing the construction moisture
Which
drying.
is doable. I could leave my sub-slab tall and tape to it towards the end of construction.
And you could put a piece under the mud sill and let it just drape down.
Exactly.
And then put the
tape to
filler
it.
piece in.
But if you're going to do...
But why? Yeah.
Yeah, in other words, if you're going to put a wall to the interior of that to insulate, then you've now got a vapor retarder on the outside of the rest of that assembly. If it's got a framed wall in it, well, shoot, now if a vapor retarder is required to the inside of that, now I've got no drying potential in either direction or very little. So I would say, why do we want
bother?
Because the moisture barrier underneath the slab is not to the interior of the slab. It's,
The only reason I can think of to do it would be that you're going to use some hydrosensitive insulation in the basement wall.
But in
system.
which case, can we not just void it a tiny bit behind it? We're going to hold our frame walls off of the wall by half an inch anyway.
Okay, but so I'll play devil's advocate. If you're going to blow cellulose in there, how do you void it?
Well, those are idiots.
Oh, okay, so there you go.
So
Princess.
you net the backside of your wall before you stand the wall up.
You could do that.
But if we have a vapor barrier on the inside of the concrete, what did we roll on the outside of the concrete to make it waterproof? How much do we retard the drying potential of that wall if we put a bitumen coating that's mostly vapor closed on the outside and a 0.6 vapor retarder on the inside? Like, we don't need it.
I don't see how that is a big gain. And maybe we need more information about the particular
Yeah, but
assembly.
I can't just thinking about watching guys work. That is a pain in the neck to install.
Yes, it is.
It's either if you try and install it initially, it's a pain in the neck to leave it dragged across and then fold it up and over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're protecting the piece that's laying there.
And I think what we're all saying is, even, regardless of climate, the need for a 0.6 Class 1 vapor retarder to the interior of your concrete, I don't understand what the need is there.
Yeah, if you're really concerned about continuity in that instance, couldn't we just leave that flap on top of the slab, build our wall, and then tape that 0.6 to a smart vapor retarder
rigid
on the
foam,
inside
put
of
a
the...
polyiso foam up.
Yeah.
Bring that up, tape it to the polyiso foam, call it a day.
You need to draw another detail, buddy.
I got one. The hybrid house has that assembly in it.
Drawn.
Okay, our last question for today is...
I always like the last. Best is always last.
Is there a resource to find architects and builders in my market?
Well,
I
don't
get
know
this question all the time.
market it is, but maybe that's not. They mean
Yeah, call
in
Carl.
any market.
Sorry, Brian, you should call Carl. Carl knows who you should work with. That's his market.
Oh, so you're giving like a tailored answer.
Call Carl.
That's pretty cool.
I'll read his phone
Who's
number
Carl?
out. I don't know. It's a joke.
Oh, it's a joke.
That's okay.
Dave's
the
not here.
best jokes are the ones that you have to explain
Dave's
to people.
not here.
So I get this question all the time. People, and I know, like,
He gets it in Colombia mostly.
where do I find a good
And
builder?
any good
Do
builders
you know
in
any good
Colombia?
builders?
No.
Boy, you just went from princess to lousy builder.
It happens. And I have a couple suggestions. My number one suggestion is
For builders in
a,
Colombia, or
find a HERS rater in your market and ask that HERS rater who's building the best house in town,
I
because
always
that
tell
guy
people,
knows.
I tell people just call the building inspector and ask him. He goes out there and inspects the work. A lot of them, I get a bunch of calls.
The only problem with that is I explained how an ERV works to a building inspector the other day. My client knew more about how the ERV worked than the
Yeah, but
building
you don't
inspector.
care. You just care about your name getting out there.
Well,
so if
when
you
we
become
talk-
friends with the building inspector,
When we talk about the need for education, we definitely need
Yeah.
code education. Steve and I actually
so
did.
why my building inspector gives my name? Because he calls me and says, "Hey, I'm at this project and I see this. What do you think? Is this okay if I let this go?" And so we have a good rapport with each other. And
Some of the toughest educational or training sessions I did were for code officials. So there's definitely a need there, but
and you can always tell when a
and
code
who's
official.
to blame? Like, they have a lot on their plate that they have to
Yeah,
worry about.
that's true.
But he has to understand why the handrail has to go back to the wall. Does he really have to be concerned with absolutely everything that I find important? No, I get it.
yeah.
I can always tell when building inspector just went to training because they come back and now they have this hot point.
Yeah,
Like,
they have,
oh, what are you doing for a vapor retarder here? It's like, you've never said anything about a vapor retarder before. All of a sudden, you're throwing out big words here, buddy.
One last thing is
So
that
belittling.
this came up on Green Building Advisor, and they did develop a bulletin board where they tried to make it a community so that people could identify high-performance architects or builders in the area. I don't know how successful that's been, but you might want to check that out.
There you go.
okay, I'm throwing one in here as a loop just to see if there's a...
Why don't you throw in some added stuff? We got time.
What's the one question you get the most via emails through your website? Besides, do you work in
How
my
much
market?
do I charge?
Mine is, how do you spell Yoast?
How do they spell it when they ask you?
How could it be? Well, they don't have to spell it then, right? They just say, hey, Peter.
How do we say your last name? Or how do we spell your last name?
Yeah.
I was asking because you said email and you said, how do you spell Yoast? Well, how do they spell it when they ask how to spell it?
Yeah, I guess this is mainly unbidden, but you would think it was a pretty simple word to spell, but it's Youst, Yoist.
Yoist?
Or they pronounce
Like
it
moist.
Yost or
Yoist.
Yoist when it's Yost. That just seems silly to me.
Yoist.
I mean, basic, okay, that you needed some explanation on how to pronounce.
Yeah, they don't. Nobody gets that right.
Okay.
I'll leave it within a story. Growing up, like it was interesting because everybody did the list alphabetically. I was usually first, so the teacher or whoever would get up and say, Stephen Bazek. It's like, okay. Even drill instructors from this, and I didn't correct them, but
I have a request, and you can say no. Will you tell the moist story?
Do we really have time for the moist story?
Yeah, we do.
All right, so very early on when I was working at the building at NHB Research Center, I was working on hydrothermal analysis of an insulation project. And the only program then, there was no WOOFY, was a program that Doug Birch at NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology, had developed. It was kind of quirky, but it was called Moist. And when you pulled up the software program on a PC, he had these moist, these words that flashed across the screen.
Early 90s computer graphics.
Yeah, so it's like 1993. And so at the research center, there's 90 employees. There's 3 divisions. The fastest PC for doing this moisture modeling was over in a separate division. And I would, because it wasn't my computer, I would come in real early in the morning.
Because you're very polite.
I would come in really early in the morning to use that PC. And one morning I came in and I was working on the computer, and one of the secretaries walks behind, and I can see she's kind of looking at my screen, and I had just booted up, the program. And the next thing I know, about an hour and a half later, I get called into the president of the company's office, and there are tears coming down her cheeks. She's laughing so hard. And she goes, "Do you know why you're in my office?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Well, there's been a complaint about your behavior." And I thought, really? Well,
I complain about your behavior every day.
Yeah, and she
I
said,
can see that.
and now she's trying not to laugh so hard again. She said, as the secretary was coming in behind you, you had pulled up the program. It's going moist. She thought you were doing something pornographic or something.
She thought you were in
on
the adult
PC when you're
content early in the office. I
And
snuck in because they have fast internet here.
So Liza had to explain, no, that's a moisture modeling program. It's not something pornographic.
I'd
Although it
like
does
to
pique-
add a
it does
story.
pique-
I can't beat that. So.
It does pique Peter's interest, though. Okay, thanks for watching the UnBuild It podcast today on YouTube. Thanks for listening on whatever device you're on. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes if you think we deserve it. That's the way it gets out to other people, other strangers. For you to be able to share it with your friends is the way it gets out to people that you know, and we want you to do that. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. You can click the little bell so that you get a reminder whenever we publish something. There you go. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Thanks for watching.
Ready.